subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. It's quick, easy, and it helps us keep creating new content for you. The first time I lay with another man happened on the very same day my husband took me to the hospital, believing I was having an anxiety attack. It was a Tuesday in March. Gustavo, my husband, came home from work early, something rare for him. He found me on the couch, hands trembling, face pale. All I could think about was whether I still carried his scent, whether there was any trace he might notice. I wasn't afraid of what I had done. I was terrified he might realize it. He thought it was stress, or maybe a sudden drop in blood pressure. He insisted on taking me to the hospital. In the car, he held my hand with a tenderness that made me nauseous. The doctor said everything was fine. Simple exhaustion, nothing more. No one knew that earlier that morning, at exactly 11:20, I was in the home of a stranger, my lingerie lying on the floor. I hadn't sought him out, or at least that's what I like to tell myself. It happened during a heater inspection. He was a tall technician with large hands and a rural accent. He spoke slowly, without checking the time. He looked at me as though he truly saw me, not as a mother, not as a wife, but simply as Mariana. The conversation was light, meaningless. I offered him coffee. He mentioned his hands were cold from working with metal, and when his fingers brushed against my wrist, I didn't pull away. It wasn't love. It wasn't passion. It was escape. For days afterward, I asked myself what I had done. But then, I felt alive. The problem wasn't that I did it. The problem was, I didn't stop. Gustavo, so methodical and absorbed in his routine, didn't notice, at least not at first. He had never been jealous or suspicious, but he was obsessed with time. He knew exactly when I left work, how long bus 67 took, and the precise minutes between the front gate and the couch. If I was late, he asked calmly, but with eyes that paid close attention. That was the first slip. On that Thursday, I told him I was going to a happy hour with the girls from work. Not entirely a lie. One of them had indeed organized it. But I slipped away after my first glass of wine. I said I was tired, and while they traded kisses and emojis in the WhatsApp group, I was already crossing the street toward Ricardo's car, the technician. When I returned home at 2 in the morning, my hair still carrying his scent, Gustavo was in the living room. The lights were off except for the reading lamp. He didn't say much, only lifted his gaze from his book and said, "I hope you had a good time." I nodded, kissed his forehead, and went straight to the bathroom. That night, he asked nothing, nor the next. But he started acting differently. He no longer looked at me the same way at the table. He spoke less. He began leaving his laptop in the living room, using it without headphones, something he had never done before, and playing videos I'd never seen him watch. Psychology talks, relationship advice, even podcasts about infidelity. I noticed, but said nothing. I feigned indifference, though inside something stirred. It wasn't guilt. It was suspicion. I felt he had already sensed the change. One afternoon, while folding clothes in the bedroom, I overheard him speaking on the phone with his sister. I was sure he didn't know I was listening. He said, "I don't know. There's something off about Mariana. She used to tell me everything, but now she speaks so little, goes out more often, and sometimes I feel like she's avoiding me. I don't want to think the worst, but it's as if she's caught up in something else. I know how she gets when she's nervous. I can always tell. I stood there, frozen, with one of his t-shirts in my hands. It hurt to hear him say that, not out of anger in his voice, but pure doubt and disappointment. Still, I didn't feel remorse. I felt fear, not that he might leave me, but that he might uncover something I couldn't even explain to myself. The blow came the following Saturday. We were at my in-laws' house for the usual tedious lunch, with the kids running wild in the garden. Gustavo was unusually calm, even chattier than normal, as if he were putting on a show. I was sitting on the sofa with his mother when he stood up and said, "I'll just pop to the hardware store. I need something for the Switch." He left without any rush. 20 minutes later, he returned, but he wasn't carrying a bag, and he wasn't the same man. When he walked in, his face wore that familiar expression, the one he gets when he's holding back an explosion. He pulled me aside and said bluntly, "Are you cheating on me, Mariana?" I was paralyzed, staring at him, unsure what expression to wear. It wasn't the question itself. It was the certainty in his tone. "Why are you asking that?" I replied, trying not to sound guilty, but it was pointless. "Because I'm not an idiot," he shot back. "And because I saw you, Mariana, today, getting out of a car that's not yours, kissing another man, and it wasn't just a friendly goodbye." I didn't know what to say. Literally, every word that came to mind sounded like an excuse. "Where were you?" I asked, almost by reflex. He looked at me with a mix of disgust and pain. "I followed you. When you said you were going to buy some pants, it didn't sit right with me, so I followed. The worst part is, I wasn't even surprised. I just needed the confirmation." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as a knot tightened in my stomach. But it wasn't sadness. It was a horrible kind of relief. I didn't have to hide anymore. But at what cost? "How long?" he asked. "How long have you not cared about any of this?" I couldn't keep up the act any longer. "I don't know, Gustavo. It started without a plan. I didn't want to hurt you." Those last oaths slipped out, and I regretted them instantly as they ignited him. "You didn't want to hurt me? You're making a fool of me." He grabbed my arm firmly, but not roughly. "Do you think this doesn't hurt? Sleeping with another man, then coming home to kiss our kids and lie beside me? Is that not hurting me?" I had no response. I just lowered my head. He released my arm and stepped back. "Tell me clearly, Mariana. Have you fallen in love with him?" I shook my head. No, it wasn't love. It was just an escape. But how do you explain that to someone who thought you were his safe haven? Why did you keep this up? What the hell was going through your head to throw it all away? I looked at him, feeling fear, anger, and helplessness all at once. "I don't know, Gustavo. I felt invisible, like just another piece of furniture in this house. I didn't do it out of revenge. It just happened." We fell into silence, with my in-laws still in the other room. No one suspected a thing, but in that shadowy hallway of their house, we were already transformed, two strangers in the places we once called our own. "This won't go unanswered, Mariana," he said, his voice sharp as he turned toward the car. In that moment, I knew the fall had truly begun. Gustavo didn't come home that night, and my messages went unanswered. I didn't call. I had no words to offer. I sat on the sofa for hours, the children asleep upstairs, staring at my phone screen without touching it, waiting for the sound of his key in the lock that never came. I rose at 6, made coffee I couldn't drink, and prepared breakfast for the kids as if nothing had shattered. I drove them to school with a smile that ached inside, though I felt utterly broken. On my way back, I saw Gustavo's car in the garage. My legs trembled as I climbed the stairs. I entered the bedroom and found him sitting on the bed, still in yesterday's clothes, his eyes swollen. Whether from sleep or tears, I couldn't tell. He said nothing when he saw me, and so did I. I closed the door and stood there, frozen, wanting him to speak first, because I didn't know where to begin. But he remained silent. I moved closer and sat on the edge of the bed. Without meeting my eyes, he finally said, "I've already talked to the lawyer." I froze and asked, "He says if there's proof of infidelity, everything changes. The custody, the assets, all of it. Are you going to do this?" I whispered. "Are you going to take the children from me?" Gustavo turned to me then, his eyes hollow, devoid of the warmth I once knew. "I don't know, Mariana. I don't want to hurt them, but I can't live with this. Do you think this is just some argument? It's not. You've crossed a line that can't be undone." I didn't argue. I couldn't. He stood, went to the closet, and started packing a backpack with clothes. "You're leaving?" I asked. "Yes," he replied, not looking at me. "To my sister's for a few days, until I figure out what to do with all this." I stepped closer. "Gustavo, I didn't think it through. I didn't plan any of it. It just happened." He let out a bitter laugh. "That's clear enough. You acted without a thought for our family, our children, or me, as if it all meant nothing." I reached out to touch his arm, but he pulled away with a firm, unyielding gesture. No violence, just resolve. "Don't. Don't touch me. Don't come with your tenderness now. You've lied to my face for weeks, maybe months. And now, you want understanding?" "I just want you to listen," I said. "I'm listening," he replied, "but everything you say rings hollow. You deceived me, Mariana. You slept beside me after being with someone else. What kind of person does that?" I had so much to say, but nothing felt right. No excuse could justify it. Not the boredom, the routine, or that empty feeling inside. Nothing. And that was the hardest part. I couldn't defend myself without sounding pathetic. "I don't love him," I admitted. "I don't even know why I kept seeing him. He's not better than you, not smarter, not more handsome. He just looked at me, talked to me, made me feel something, even if it was all a lie." Gustavo turned back, his gaze piercing. "And what about me? Didn't I talk to you? Didn't I look at you? Didn't I do everything for this family?" "Yes," I said softly. "You did everything for everyone, except yourself. You've forgotten who you are, Gustavo. You've become like a machine. Schedules, chores, routines. We didn't go out. We didn't talk. You were always there, yet it felt like you weren't. As if the only thing that mattered was keeping everything running." Gustavo took a deep breath. "And that's supposed to justify you sleeping with someone else?" "No," I said. "It doesn't justify anything. I'm just trying to understand myself." He stayed silent, then grabbed his backpack. "I don't know if I'm coming back," he said, and walked out. The days that followed were hell. My children kept asking about their father, and I made up excuses. Gustavo hadn't blocked me, but he didn't reply to anything. One night, I decided to go to his sister's house. He opened the door, looked at me without a word. Can we talk? I asked. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let me in. We sat in the living room in silence, like strangers. I'm not asking you to forgive me, I said. I just want to know what happens now. I don't know either, he sighed. Part of me wants to punish you for this. Another part just wants to disappear. But the kids, they're innocent in all this. Are you going to tell them? I asked. Not now, he said. But I can't promise I won't if things turn into chaos. I suggested we go to therapy. He said he didn't know if there was anything left to save, or if he even wanted to. I don't trust you anymore, Mariana, he told me. And without trust, what's left? I had no answer. I left that house knowing nothing would ever be the same, and that maybe I deserved every second of it. A week after leaving, Gustavo came back without warning. It was 11 in the morning. I was working in my home office, headphones on, when I saw him slip in quietly. No greeting, no glance my way. He went straight to his room. Minutes later, he emerged holding a thick folder, stuffed it into his backpack, and just as he was about to leave, he spoke. You need to go to the lawyer's office on Monday at 5. His voice was flat, firm, the tone of someone giving an instruction. For what? I asked. To sign the agreement, he said. I want this settled as quickly as possible. I froze. I knew this could happen, but not so fast. What agreement? Separation. Shared custody, division of property, use of the house, all legal. I stood up slowly. Gustavo, this is too drastic. Can't we talk more, see a couples therapist? Try something before jumping straight to the end? He looked at me with a mix of exhaustion and contempt. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of a stage where I no longer have to look at you and think about how you lied to me every single day. It's my attempt at living in peace. Is that really what you want? I pressed. Honestly, there's nothing left in you that still holds on to what we were? Gustavo didn't answer. He simply opened the door and walked out. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was coldness. Monday came, and I went to the office like he'd asked. A woman greeted me and handed me some papers. I instantly recognized Gustavo's handwriting in the documents. It was a detailed agreement, meticulously planned, with clear and precise language. No flourish, no detours. He didn't want to fight over anything. He was leaving me the car, the house, the furniture. All he asked was equal time with the children and no child support, since we both worked. I didn't feel hurt because of what he was asking, but because of what he was leaving behind. It was as if everything we had built no longer held any value for him, as if he'd rather give me everything just to avoid any further contact. The lawyer explained to me that by law, this agreement was entirely possible. All it needed now was my signature. When I finished reading, Gustavo walked in. He wore a suit, white shirt, his hair slicked back, dark circles deep under his eyes. He sat across from me without looking at me. Did you read it? He asked. I nodded. What did you think? It's fair, I said. So you'll sign it? He pressed. I hesitated. Yes. Perfect, he replied. Then all of this ends today. He picked up the folder and waited. I stood up and looked at him. Is that all? I asked. No, he said. There's more. He handed me a flash drive. I suggest you watch it at home, alone. And after that, don't call me again. Everything has already been said. I left without another word. The way home was nothing but a loop of dark thoughts. When I arrived, I locked myself in my room and plugged the drive into my laptop. It took several seconds to load. The screen filled with folders, names, records, calls, messages, videos, audio clips, screenshots. I opened one. Screenshots of my conversations with Ricardo. Some recent, others long past, all neatly organized. Then came audio recordings. They weren't mine. They were of conversations taped without me ever knowing. Some inside the car, others from phone calls on speaker. And then the videos. Hidden camera footage, probably from the living room. My blood ran cold. One video showed me talking to Ricardo on a video call, smiling, saying I couldn't wait to see him again. Another captured me changing clothes in the bedroom while replying to his message. Every file had a date, a time, a context. Gustavo hadn't yelled at me, hadn't insulted me, hadn't broken anything. He had recorded me, cataloged me, exposed me with surgical precision, like it was professional work. And now he was handing it all over, like a sentence, for me to watch, for me to know, for me to never deny again. He didn't just leave me. He dismantled me emotionally, clean, methodical, without scandal. And it hurt more than any insult could. The next morning brought another blow. Opening my work email, I saw a notification from HR, an attached file. I clicked it. A formal letter. My contract was temporarily suspended, pending an internal investigation. No details were given, but I understood instantly. The video clearly showed how I'd used the company's meeting room after hours to meet Ricardo. The place was unmistakable, and I had told them that night I was at a team dinner. I had no idea how Gustavo had gotten that footage, whether someone else had sent it to him or he had leaked it himself, but it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. I spent the rest of the day motionless on the couch. I felt empty, erased, as if my life no longer belonged to me. Gustavo hadn't shouted, but his silence had been a calculated punishment. He didn't just walk away. He made sure the price of my betrayal was real. He made sure I understood every last detail of what I had destroyed. The following Tuesday, Gustavo came by to collect some boxes he'd left in storage. I was in the kitchen when I heard the front door open with his key. I didn't move. I just waited. After several minutes, he came down, opened the storage room door, carried up two medium-sized boxes, and walked past me without saying a word. I saw him and wanted to speak, but I wasn't sure I had the right. I took a deep breath and followed him to the entrance. When he set the boxes down to close the door, I said, "Gustavo, wait." He froze, hand still on the doorknob. "Can we talk for 5 minutes?" I asked. He didn't say yes, but he didn't refuse either. He shut the door, turned toward me. "5 minutes," he said, without moving from where he stood. I leaned against the wall, just a few steps from him. "I know I can't ask you to forgive me. Not after everything that's happened, and especially not after what you've done since. I won't try to justify myself. What I did was a betrayal, and I don't expect you to understand. I just want you to know that it hurts, not only because of what happened, but because of how I failed you." Gustavo's expression didn't change. "And what good is that now?" he asked. "You think that just because you feel bad, things will go back to how they were?" I shook my head. "I know they won't, but I needed to tell you. I've lost the respect of everyone, even my children. I've lost my job, and I'm sure you don't even want to look at me anymore. But I want to end this face to face, not drown in silence. Gustavo sat on the edge of the couch. He didn't invite me to sit, but I did anyway, at the opposite end. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then, still not looking at me, he spoke. I've been thinking all this time too. Don't think it was easy. I had to hold back from smashing everything, from telling you exactly what I think, from hurting you with words. But in the end, all that seemed like a waste of energy because you'd already done it yourself. I swallowed hard. I know. And I'm not just talking about what happened with him, he continued. I mean everything. The months you pretended, the excuses you invented, the look on your face while I spoke to you in trust. You took my dignity without shouting, my peace without breaking anything. You took yourself away without ever leaving. I had no answers. I wanted to say it hadn't been so calculated, that I hadn't thought of it as demolishing our relationship, but it would have sounded like a lie. Gustavo ran a hand over his face. You don't know how many nights I ask myself if it was my fault, if being so methodical, so focused on the kids made you feel alone. And then I realized that even if that were true, you had 1,000 ways to talk about it, to tell me, to face it. But you chose another way, and that changes everything. I wanted to take his hand, but stopped myself. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I asked. I don't know, he replied. I won't answer now because I don't want to give you false hope. Today, I can't. Today, all I can think about is how to start again without dragging all of this with me. And do you think we can still be a family for the kids? I whispered. Yes, he said. For them, yes. I don't want them to live with hatred, to think their parents are enemies. But that doesn't mean I forgive you. It means their stability matters more than my pain. The conversation went on for several minutes. I asked if he was seeing someone, if he thought about starting a new relationship. He said no, that he wasn't even considering it, that for now, all he wanted was to regain his peace. Then he asked me if I was still speaking to Ricardo. I told him no, that ever since I learned everything he had uncovered, I had cut off contact completely. He didn't entirely believe me, but it no longer seemed to matter to him. This isn't about him, he said. It's about you. If it hadn't been him, it would have been someone else, because this was your decision, not a coincidence. When he stood to leave, he finally looked at me for the first time all afternoon. Mariana, I mean this sincerely. I don't wish you harm. I don't want to see you suffer. But I can't be near you. You remind me of the worst thing I've ever lived through. I nodded, my eyes brimming. I understand. He picked up the boxes, opened the door, and before stepping out, said something I hadn't expected. I'm changing my phone number. If the kids need anything, I'll use email. I'm not cutting everything off, but I can't see you every week. It's not revenge. It's self-preservation. I didn't know how to respond. I watched him walk down the hallway, get into his car, and drive away. This time, I didn't collapse or cry right away. I simply sat there, realizing there was nothing left to say. 3 weeks have passed since that last conversation with Gustavo. Since then, my life has become a blank space, a kind of limbo, where I try to understand how I could have reached this point. I don't wake up thinking of him, or Ricardo, or the family I once had. I wake up wondering how to get through the day without feeling like everything I touch comes undone. This morning, I opened my eyes in a bed I once shared with someone who knew me even in my silences. Now, I don't even share the memories. No messages, no calls, no one asking how I am. The children are slowly adapting to this absurd routine, where father and mother are no longer together, but disguise it with forced smiles and improvised snacks. The hardest part isn't what broke, it's the part of me unsure if I'll ever be able to fix anything again. I go about my days quietly, as if I were a temporary employee in my own life. I buy groceries, wash dishes, check the kids' homework, and avoid any mirror that might show me the truth. Ricardo tried calling once. I didn't pick up. Later, he sent a message saying he didn't understand what had happened, that he just wanted to be with me. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to fix things with Gustavo, but because I'd realized Ricardo was never truly important to me, just a poorly chosen escape. If I passed him in the street, I wouldn't know what to say. He isn't responsible for my infidelity. I chose him. I put myself here. I crashed into this reality. Every decision was mine, and every consequence is mine as well. One afternoon, while the kids were with Gustavo, I sat in the kitchen with a notebook and pen. I began writing everything I wished I had told Gustavo before we signed the papers. Not to give it to him, but to understand myself. I wrote that I admired him, that though I rarely said it, I always felt he was the anchor of our family, that his silences gave me peace, that when I grew distant, it wasn't from lack of love, but from my inability to recognize I needed help, that I was empty and didn't know how to ask to be seen differently. I wrote that I never wanted to destroy him, that I never imagined he could retaliate the way he did, and that although it hurt how he acted, I now understand he had no other way to make me feel what he had lived through because of me. I don't know if he will ever read those words. Perhaps he shouldn't, but writing them, it did me good. The children don't ask as much anymore. At first, they would look at me strangely, as if waiting for me to say it had all been a misunderstanding, that their father would be coming back. Now, they don't ask, they simply adapt. I try to give them stability, to be present, to avoid crying in front of them, but I can see they've changed. I notice it in their words, in the way they say goodbye, in how they ask whether they'll spend the weekend at their father's house or with me. I took from them the idea of a united family, and there's no way to give it back. Gustavo does his part. He picks them up on time, speaks to them with warmth, takes good care of them. But he never steps inside, not even to say hello. He declines invitations to birthdays or school meetings we could attend together. He does everything from a distance. Sometimes I think this quiet distance is a harsher punishment than any shouted words. Work remains suspended. The internal investigation went nowhere. No proof that I affected performance or committed any serious mistake. Still, they offered me voluntary termination with bare minimum conditions. I accepted without arguing. I had no strength to fight for anything. I searched for other jobs, updated my resume, went to interviews. But it's not easy to walk through the world pretending you don't carry the mark of someone who threw life away for a story that wasn't worth it. And some nights, I wake up thinking it was all a distant dream, something that happened to another person. But then I look around and realize, no, this house is emptier because I made it so. I have no long-term plan, I don't know if I'll rebuild my life, if I'll trust anyone again, if I'll find a way to forgive myself. What I do know is that nothing I do can repair what I've broken. I can only try not to damage what's still left. And what's left are two children who need a mother. Present, consistent, honest, even if she's imperfect, even if she's made mistakes. I don't want to be remembered for the harm I caused, but for what I tried to rebuild afterward. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I will try. If one day Gustavo walks through that door again, even just to talk, to see us without resentment, to share a meal without tension, I'll know that at least part of all this was worth something. And if he doesn't, if he chooses a path far from mine, I'll accept that too. Because for the first time in a long while, I know I am worthy. And knowing that, even when it hurts, feels like the beginning of something more real than everything that came before.